321. Yes, I'm able to count tonight of the Canadian Prepper Podcast. We are recording on Guy Fawkes Day 2023. My name's Eric, host of the show, based in Southern Ontario, target shooter, hunter, ham radio operator, and of course, computer geek. As a first responder, witnessed an over-reliance on emergency services during major events, started a small preparedness company to help everybody remember the 5th of November.
You actually read it. That's so sweet.
I did.
Yeah.
Nice.
My name is Ian. I am a part-time hippie on Vancouver Island who has no idea how OPSAT works. And today I guess I'm the unpaid intern, so I'm new to the show again.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
who are you?
You're the who?
Yeah.
How did this guy get the link?
Oh, bad OPSEC on your part.
What's OPSEC? I'm Armando. I drive a bread truck in Wisconsin. I'm also a first responder from Ontario, and I like learning things, and I worry about our fragile infrastructure.
And I'm Jeff. I am based in Central Ontario. I'm a target shooter, ham radio operator, general overall handyman, and weather nerd.
And I'm Brad. I'm in Eastern Ontario, part-time amateur prepper, constantly trying to better myself.
And I'm the frugal gunny, recently moved to Northern Ontario, pretty much in the middle of nowhere. I'm an off-gridder, shooter, hunter, fisher, gatherer kind of guy, and a generalist. And it's only recently that I came to accept
I'm Terry.
Except that he's frozen.
Oh, he's frozen. Yes, he did. Is he still there?
yes.
Okay, good. It's my turn. Okay. Terry, I live in sunny Central Ontario, starving indie author, pathetic hunter, terrible fisherman, and I'm here because somebody said there was beer.
Oh, there's beer?
There's beer. I heard there's beer here.
Sweet.
Well played, Terry. Well played. There might be a beer or two as well, yes.
And if you want to help support the show, embrace consumerism, not communism, consumerism, and buy some swag. We have both the Canadian Prepper Podcast t-shirt and the tactical Velcro patch at prepperpodcast.ca. All proceeds help keep the lights on, the backup generator fueled, and help cover some of our costs.
All right, if you enjoyed the show, please take a few minutes and submit a review on iTunes or wherever you may have found us. We seriously want your feedback, good or bad, even if it's just a topic you want us to cover or something you learned this week. You can email us at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca.
Look at the intern there, just reading the lines perfectly.
It's almost like I wrote him or something.
I think he really wants a job.
He must have practiced.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got some basic content for you in this episode. We're going to start off with some relevant news articles as usual. We'll update you on our personal preps. Then we're going to get into the main topic. And yeah, we're nerding out on ham radio again tonight.
Awesome. Well, news time. Let's see here. I guess, the war in Ukraine is nearing its, inevitable conclusion here. I guess as they're no longer the main attraction and the kind of like the geopolitical side piece of the U.S. right now. They have an article here that says that the U.S. has been basically approaching the Russians for a peace negotiations. Yeah, and I guess they're running out of ammo and people and fuel and stuff. So
who's that? Ukraine's running out of stuff, or
Ukraine's
or the countries that have been supporting them for the last year and a half.
Yes.
Okay.
Everything. So no, it's kind of funny because even we gave away all of our rifles and everything else, and so basically even the Canadian Forces is short of rifles now. Even so, yeah, they've pretty much run out of supply lines. They've run out of people. They've run out of everything, and now the U.S. is focusing on obviously another hotbed of activity. So, yeah, it seems to be winding down, which is a bit of a surprise out of the blue, so to speak. Another article I had was Russia making an ash of itself. There is a volcano that erupted on eastern Russia there, and lo and behold, the volcanic ash cloud just landed in Vancouver last night. And so that actually shut down a bunch of flights for about, I think, 6 or 7 hours, something like that, by the time it was all said and done. So it just goes to show you it doesn't take a nuclear weapon to shut down everything. It just takes Mother Nature now and then. So,
but volcanic ash clogs the engines and stuff, does it not? Isn't that
it's
kind of the big problem?
It's aerosolized glass particles, right? So it's basically what it is. So as soon as it goes to an airplane engine, it basically turns the internals of the engine into solid glass. So And not to mention scrubs the windshield so you can't see out of them and everything else. But yeah, it'll basically cause massive engine failures that aren't recoverable. So they basically ground all the airplanes as the ash cloud flies over. And then once it clears out of the way, then they can go again. But I guess flights were diverting all around it over the Pacific last night and all sorts of stuff. And then it shut down Vancouver Airport for a while. So that was a bit of a surprise too. Yeah, and that's all I had.
Was it a particularly egregious eruption or just happened to have the ash cloud land right in Vancouver?
That's an awfully big word for you. Actually, no, it was I guess it's the largest volcano in Eurasia. So it's the one on the Kamchatka Peninsula, and I can't pronounce the name of it. Anyways, but it let off a big belch the other day, about 4 days ago, and I guess nobody really died from it per se, but I guess it was shut down in eastern Russia for a while, and then it was kind of just floating across, just like Fallout style, and then it finally hit Canada.
And as Gary T says, all it takes is one ash hole to shut things down.
Ba-dum-bum.
Well done. Well done.
Yeah. That's all I had.
So I was just looking at the Israel-Gaza and the Russia-Ukraine situation, and one article that stuck to me was really talking about Israel-Gaza spreading into a wider conflict. I mean, you're sort of hearing of incursions into Syria and that kind of thing. It's not something specific, but there's a huge buildup of naval vessels in the Mediterranean, and it just feels like one big powder keg. I'm only mentioning it partially just to timestamp this podcast so that a year from now we can sort of look back fondly on the good old days. Anyway,
Yeah.
I don't have a doubt. Just mentioning country, I don't have a doubt that Iran is going to have a major, significant part in this at some point in the not too distant future, and that's something we should be concerned about.
Well, it's actually interesting, a couple of geopolitical changes, because the first thing is, like you said, Iran is getting a little bit uppity. They haven't left their own borders since the 1700s, right? So this is a big step for them if they're going to start, projecting outwards. But China put a warship in the region too, which is kind of way out of their usual area of operations. And Israel moved out of the Mediterranean into the Red Sea. So again, everybody's kind of like stretching out a bit. So, leads to a higher potential for conflict, right?
Yep.
Anyway.
Okay, so I had, and it should come as no surprise to anyone, that our CCFR, Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights, and a few other actors lost that court case against the federal government to put a stop to that OIC gun ban. No surprise, with our wonderful justice system that we got. But they lost every argument and basically sided with the Liberals. Big surprise, right?
I'm going to bet money that was a Liberal appointee judge.
Oh, is there any doubt in your mind?
Nope.
Yeah, it's gone the way of the banana republic when it comes to the justice system nowadays, because I think they just follow marching orders and the outcome is usually predetermined. And yeah, instead of actually looking at the merit of the case law, it's kind of gone a little sad.
Yeah, and, all the bull that was going around about it and the lies and so on, just completely irrelevant, just like everything else that goes on.
Yeah,
pretty sad day for democracy.
Well, yeah, it's unfortunate that it played out that way, but I'm sure there'll be an appeal. We'll see what happens. Drag it out a few more years.
Well, I guess that's the good thing is, like, no matter who lost or who won, there's going to be an appeal no matter what. I mean, unfortunately, one side has unlimited legal resources and the other side has to get funded. But I mean, no matter what, the lawyers are going to get rich, right?
Yeah. CCFR says they're going to appeal it. So we'll see how far that goes.
Time will tell. Time will tell. Well, with that sad little bit of news, should we move into what we've done lately for preps?
So I cleaned and sorted through my garage, got some of my tools and supplies a bit more ordered and inventoried. So it's always fun finding the things you'd forgotten about or hadn't seen in a while. Tried to get some of the last bits of outdoor winter prep done. We've had a bit of snow up here, and it's always a little scary because there's always more to do. I started musing about getting some sandbags, empty ones, so that if there is any flooding issues come spring, I'm not scrambling looking for sandbags or figuring out what to do. Just as sort of something that was floating around in my brain. And my good buddy just took possession of their new cottage. So I've been looking at different comms options for them. He may be getting a ham radio course for a Christmas present. Shh, don't tell. But looking at local repeaters and the topography between the cottage and here. So I put a note, the link in the webcast. There's a great site where you can just plop 2 pins on a map, set elevations, and it'll chart out the topography between them. So if there's a high range and you're not going to get line of sight, it's pretty cool. It's a neat tool worth looking at. So whether we are able to do it with local repeaters or if we need to get into high frequency or NVIS, whatever those are, I guess we'll have to find out.
Yes, for all.
Yeah, of course. The cottage has some really tall trees there, like huge pine trees. So, I think we're going to have to get very creative, but we can get some antennas crazy high up. So I'm very, very excited to play that out.
Is this a 3-season or a 4-season cottage?
It's just a 3-season that he got, mostly because it's just lake draw water. So I think they have to pull the water lines in. Well, the water lines are already in, the pump's sitting in the garage. But lovely cottage for him, great fishing, and a great bug out location, I think. So anyway, it's really cool. I'm very happy for them.
And the biggest question, does it have power or is it solar? How is it powered?
It is on the grid. It's on sort of a street that gets plowed and has actually has like local garbage pickup. It's kind of cool that way.
Nice.
So it's an urban cottage.
Yeah, reasonably, but it's on a good acre. It's surrounded by trees. It's on a huge lake with a gajillion bays and good fishing, which was one of their priorities. And it's a really nice cottage, and so we're super happy for them. It's always nice to see your friends doing well.
Sounds very civilized.
Definitely.
Very nice.
Good for them.
Yeah.
So a question for you. How much do sandbags actually go for? Like, where would you get them? Because on top of the flooding aspect, there's also the ballistic protection aspect, which always, kind of comes to the forefront when you hear sandbags. But I'm actually kind of curious for the flooding aspect, how much it would cost you to get, like, say, a couple hundred sandbags on a pallet just sitting there waiting to use or whatever. Like, I don't know if they're like $5 each, $2 each, or.
Well, I was just looking at the empty sandbags. Quite frankly, just on like an AliExpress, order 50 or 100 sandbags in that kind of standard size. We have enough property here, and I usually have like a full triaxle full of gravel dumped so that I can fill all the potholes in my driveway and stuff. So I figure if I have the aggregate here and have something I can put it in other than individual garbage bags, just sort of seems like a fairly low volume, low cost, but wow, that would be handy if there's any issues. Even if it's just, a 4-inch break across the garage so nothing's flooding in that way. So just something I've been musing with.
Well, that's a good idea. Because when the time comes, it's like you don't want to wait for that AliExpress delivery when the floods are going to be here in 48 hours or less. So, or whatever, right?
Well,
it's just nice to have them on hand. But
I just checked one of my suppliers. I can get sandbags if anyone's interested.
It's a good thing I know a guy.
The time-consuming part is filling.
The news stories where they have people filling sandbags, and they grab some pylons, make a big funnel to speed up the process. And it's all lovely, but if you're rushing around trying to find sandbags when you need them,
all the politicians want to show up and get their picture taken and go, "Look at me!
I'm filling a sandbag." Yeah,
exactly.
Yep.
The reality is that's what kids are for. But
this is true. But they have to listen first.
Fine.
Yeah.
But I don't want to pile up the children in front of the garage. I want to have the children fill the sandbags. So
I can actually clarify. Yeah, you want to use them as sandbags. Yeah, you want to use them to fill sandbags.
I love it when the humor gets dark.
Is there any other form of humor?
You'd have to have a lot of kids to stop a flood at that point.
Oh boy!
Oh crap!
There we go. We're off to a great start.
Oh boy! I managed to do a little bit more house cleanup this week. Helped a lot this weekend with Pierre and Melissa doing renos on their new place, and work, and a little bit more work. That's it. Pretty boring.
I did some food prep. Love my Instant Pot, and still working away on my pile of firewood.
Absolutely nothing this week. What a whirlwind of a week for myself. It's been crazy, but I'm now off for 2 weeks, so I'm sure I'll have some stuff for the next couple of episodes.
Nice.
Very nice. Yeah.
Don't drink too much beer.
No, don't have to worry about that.
It's hard to reload and assemble radios when you're drinking beer. So you gotta
there's no such thing as too much beer.
Yeah.
There's just a lack.
Jeff must be coming over, right?
Possibly.
Well, on the subject of work, my overlords decided to release me a day early, so I'm actually here, which is nice. So yay, extra day off.
You have another job? I thought you were interning here.
Well, this
is getting awkward.
This is the unpaid job. I mean,
you said you weren't dedicating your time to anybody else.
He doesn't get a paycheck?
You'll always be my number one, Eric. Don't worry. Anyways, so reloading season is here. So this is the rainy season where it's too gross to do anything outside. So I sit in my shed and or office and reload it or prep my brass. On that note, I bought a ultrasonic cleaner on the cheap from Amazon, and after like a bunch of reviews and research and everything else, these Amazon ones seem to be fairly good. And I immediately got to work like cleaning up jewelry for the wife and doing brass and this, that, the other thing. Actually, it turns out gun parts like bolts, like the internals of bolts and stuff are like, this thing is just the bomb for cleaning up stuff like that. Hard to reach places. As long as the water can get there, it cleans it up, which is good. So big difference in the brass outcomes, especially on the inside of brass, which is kind of awesome. That was good with the ultrasonic cleaner. A lot of playing going on. Repaired some storm damage from what Jeff will discuss later on here. We've had some greenhouses toppled over and tarps on the firewood piles getting blown off, even with the weights on them and everything else. So I had to fix all that. Green shed out back here. It's like my hay shed. It was just kind of like it's fire under M for miscellaneous, like the whole big pile of stuff in there. Besides hay, there's just a mess. So I reorged and did that, some wood shelving to actually put those yellow and black Costco things. So we did like a slide out system where you could actually like stack them up and still access all of them. So you can kind of crack open the lid, reach in and still have it kind of vertically stacked. So that's kind of cool. Let's see here. I did an overhead thing in the shed too, there where you can actually throw like lighter stuff overhead without it falling on me and everything else. So it was kind of nice. Made an order from Bryden for some Mylar and O2 absorbers for reasons.
Just what could those reasons be?
Yeah, they're consumables. That's all I'm saying. Is I tend to go through them for reasons. And I happened to order some Berkey filters from this dude out in Ontario, Rapid Survival. I don't know if you heard of him, but
I hear that guy's a jerk.
Yeah,
Once or twice.
But the shipping is fast, so I let it slide, even though he's hard to deal with otherwise. I did my first in probably 2 months gun post deal. So because CGN is so last week, now we're on gun post.
I was going to say, wait a minute.
Yeah. So gun post is kind of the new up and comer. And to be fair, volume wise, I think they're actually larger than CGN now for actual ads and stuff. And I think I've done 3 deals on gun post in the last week, which is like, so the views on these ads are like much higher, I guess, than CGN because they make it easier to access for the buyer's market. So it's very interesting. And then, I had a couple dead birds pop up in the coop there, I guess dying of old age. But then also I had to process a couple. So we had excess roosters, and we had to kind of do some selective breeding, so to speak, and some hardcore eugenics. And so we took care of a couple roosters. And so we've got some chicken in the Instapot, like Jeff was mentioning, and some that's getting sent to the freezer. So I think that's it for the last week. I don't know. That's basically since last remembered anyway.
That's a pretty good achievement list, I'd say.
Yeah.
Well, it's just kind of what off the top of my head. I'm sure I was like when I was coming and going. I'm sure I did more, but I don't know. It's whatever. So
nice work, man.
Nice work. Still, it's a good amount.
Yeah, I didn't get much done. I had a long work week, things are just starting to get really busy in the new line of work. But I did manage to go retrieve my 6,500 watt generator. So I'm going to get it running again. It's been sitting around for years. At least it's been covered, not outside in the rain. But yeah, it's going to need a total do-over. Managed to do a big cleanup in the pickup truck, and even managed to clean up the inside of the windshield there. It's a brand new windshield. So I finally cleaned it the first time after 3 months having it. It's been nice. And last but not least, I'm trying to sneak in some electrical into the truck before snow flies. I don't know if that's going to manage, but that's what I've been working on.
Did you say you cleaned up Taco?
I did, yeah.
Whoa.
I know.
Say what?
That is an achievement. Gunny, good for you.
It really is.
So actually, I'm kind of curious. What kind of electrical upgrades are you talking? Like a battery blanket, or like internal stuff, or like just?
So I can run a lot more on the internal. So what I've got is a couple of off-board battery terminals.
Okay.
And I want to set those up and some really thick gauge cabling to go to those, so that from there I can run wiring to the inside of the cabin, where I'll be able to use those extended cables to add 12-volt sockets to the inside. So I can also power things like a future mobile ham radio setup, CB radio setup, and a 2,000 watt inverter inside the cabin. So that's what I'm working on.
Yeah, because I saw those posts you had on your battery there on the winch video, and that was pretty awesome. So
yeah, those are really sweet, and that was the beginning of the project, is to have a good anchoring system for all that cabling. Because one thing I can't stand is when you have the spaghetti inside your vehicle. Mm-hmm. I don't like that. I want to have some orderly cabling in there. But when you have two sets of winch wires, a front one, rear one, and then you're going to have another set of wires going to the inside to run your inverter. Then you're going to have another set of wires for the accessories you're going to run in the cabin. Well, it starts to get kind of busy. So I want to clean that up and make it look at least half professional.
Yeah, so what kind of gauge wiring would that require to go from the truck to the house? So you just have to be pretty thick, like 10 gauge or something? Or
from under the hood to the inside, I'm probably going to go with 2 watt. Which is probably the biggest that I can handle in terms of crimping lugs to and ring terminals. So it's going to be pretty thick stuff, but that'll allow me to run basically a full power load on that 2,000 watt inverter. So if for some reason I needed to take my Starlink on the road, no problem. I can do that and run even a little vacuum cleaner while I'm doing that.
Nice.
Yeah. The other thing it's meant to do is to charge the mobile battery pack that I have started working on, but it's going to take a little while. And now the entire project's going to have to go indoors for the wintertime because it's kind of awkward working on batteries out in the freezing cold. So that's what I've been doing on the prep side. It's trying to keep up with the snow. It's kind of crazy.
Build a shed.
Heated and insulated.
I'll come help.
Thanks, buddy.
Okay, for me, well, we had an exciting week. We had one of those GeneraLink systems installed where they take your power meter off and put this chunk in, and there's a plug in. So you plug your portable generator up to it, then it disconnects. Well, the grid's already down because the power is off, right? But it plugs it in, and then it doesn't feed back into the grid. So the power workers are your friend. And then it'll run your house right through your 200 amp service. So everything will run just like per normal. A heck of a lot cheaper than the Generac system, but you got to be home to start it up and you got to be home to shut her down. So it's not an automatic system, but it costs us about $2,000 tax in. So it was a pretty good deal compared to a Generac.
That's a much fairer cost.
Does it? If I was to plug a generator into it with the main power on, like hydropower on, would it kick off the hydropower? Yeah,
I think it will. It's got a series of lights on there that tell you if your power is off. Well, you'll know anyway if your power is off, but it's supposed to disconnect the system. And you won't even know when the power comes back on because your generator will have it, or having the system up will lock it out. So the power won't come back through until you disconnect it.
So it's safe in case the power comes back on.
It has an automatic disconnect, so it won't.
Yeah, it doesn't automatically disconnect. Yeah. The power could be on
just-
around the neighborhood, and you'll still be running away there, not knowing unless you're watching what's going on. So you got to be observant to when the power comes back on, so you're not running your generator for nothing, because it'll stay off until you disconnect it. Then the grid hooks back up again. So it's kind of a neat system.
No,
So
sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was going to say that's exactly what that's next on my list to install is exactly one of those. That's why I picked up that big 6,500 watt generator for almost free and did the work on to get it going and everything. That was my plan, was to have the GenerLink system, so I don't have to be running extension cords everywhere in the house. I mean, I don't mind doing it, but just being able to plug into that, as long as you're not, you turn off your high power things like, your hot water heater and probably your dryer and maybe even your stove. You don't really have to, but it depending on the size of your generator, it'll probably run your stove. But then you've got things like direct hookup for your water pump and your fridges and your freezers and all that, and you're not running around running all those extension cords. So,
because I bought that system, that Reliant system that goes through the wall.
Yep.
So you plug your generator in outside, and it goes through the wall to the inside where there's a 6 watt or a 6 outlet plug block.
Yep.
I still haven't put it in. Still working on some outdoor renos for next year and figuring out the mounting location for it. But I did start reading about that GenerLink system, and I was wanting somebody to know. I was wanting to know somebody who had experience with it. So, like Terry did, they have to get. I know you posted in the chat there the information about the guy who did it, but did Hydro have to? Did Hydro have to come out and do anything, or did this guy be able to do everything?
Yeah, no, Hydro's got to come out. He arranges the Hydro guys to come, so they are all set up at a certain time to come, and either. In our case, the Hydro guy basically did it all. He just pulled the meter off, popped this thing in, and put the clamps back on. He said, depends on who you get for a Hydro guy. He said some guys will want him to do it. The Hydro, just to make sure that it's there. Then sometimes they want to shut the power off of the pole. Just depends on how it gets done or who you get. But yeah, they look after all that for you.
So the biggest question is, how loud is it?
The generator?
Yeah.
Well, I got a great big deck box that I put the monster in. We get an 8,500 watt. It's a beast. And so I put a deck box out there to put it in, and it's a hell of a lot larger than the generator. So once I get it in there and get playing around with it, I'm going to start slipping in a bit of insulation, maybe some thick styrofoam insulation to kind of keep the noise down. I run a piece of steel pipe to take the exhaust out of the box so I can close at least some of the box up. I'm gonna have to watch the heat. It'll be a bit of an experiment to get a feel for it. And winter will be different than summer, of course, as well. So yeah, it'll be a little bit of a play. I'm sure a Generac system's a bit quieter because they're all built in really nice, but yeah, you're paying dearly for that. But yeah, so I got a box that the lid opens and the 2 doors open up on the front. So I'll put some insulation in there and play around with it a little bit.
So I just want to make sure I understand this, Terry. You're actually going to take your generator, test it, learn how to use it, and figure out the best way to operate it before any kind of major event happens?
Yeah, I don't know. We haven't had the power go out yet, Eric.
That'd be weird.
We haven't even had the power go out yet. So since we got this thing, so I'm sure we'll get a chance
you've listened
to
to the last couple of episodes where we've mentioned that might be a good idea to test things before any kind of major event happens.
Yeah, I'm working at it. I've still got a couple of things to do with it, but I would like to insulate that box, keep the noise down, so that it's not as loud as it was. So yeah, we're getting there.
Let us know how
you're a lot further ahead than a lot of other people. I mean, you've got the generator, now you've got the way to hook it up, and until I get mine, I've got that system that Brad talked about. I installed that through the wall kit, so I don't have to try and run extension cords through open windows or open doors in the middle of the winter. I just plug the cord in at the on the outside box, and I have 6, as Brad said, 6 110 plugs on the inside, and I can just run extension cords to my fridges and my freezers and all that stuff. But I really like the idea of having the Generac and being able to run 220 as well, just in case of. Not that I would probably ever use it, but maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a nice warm shower every once in a while or something, have some hot water. But I mean,
yeah,
I just think that's a lot easier than running the extension cords, although it's not bad for me being on a 1-story house and that. But if you're trying to run extension cords up and down stairs and all that stuff, it could be a pain. But
yeah, because we used a similar system to what you're speaking about, have to run extension cords, but this will give us the ability to run the well, because we're on a well, so that runs on 220. So that'll give us the ability to do that.
Yeah, my well pump isn't, and I had rewired it last year from a direct connection to a plug, so that I could unplug it and plug the extension cord into it from the through the wall kit, so I could at least have some water. So
I've got to do that with mine. My well is only a 120, but it's still nice to be able to do that. Unplug it, plug it in somewhere else. The only thing that runs 240 in the house here is the stove, the dryer, and the AC unit.
Yeah,
I think I'm picking up on a new topic.
What's that?
Yeah, it could be a good topic,
a new topic. Yeah.
I think so.
You were talking, Terry, how much did they quote you, or did you even look into it for a whole system from Generac?
Oh, no, we didn't really quote anybody, but I looked at some and talked to a few different people, and $10,000, $15,000 is not out of the question.
As we were talking, I texted my dad. He lives not too far away from me, and he got ones put in, natural gas, $13,000. Runs the entire system, runs the entire house, everything, as if nothing ever happened. They can still run the dryer and the stove, everything all at the same time.
Yeah, they're fully automatic.
Oh yeah,
they're nice.
He wanted peace of mind.
Well,
they're nice, but you're talking about a significant. I mean, and I know everybody's situation is different, but I mean, I got that generator for $100. I spent less than $100 to get it running and get it going. Even if I pay $2,000 for the Generlink system, I'm set up and going for $2,200 as opposed to $13,000.
Yeah,
and it's only as good as the accumulator and the gas line stays full, right? So
this is true.
Anywhere from 2 days to 2 weeks, basically depending on neighborhood usage.
I tried to tell him that it would be better to get like the propane one with the propane T on it or something, so you can at least put an extra tank on it and switch the tanks over back and forth. And he's, nope, I don't want that. I want the natural gas one. We're never going to run out. And so, Dad, you went through the ice storm with us, 17 days with no power. There's tons of villages around here that still had no natural gas on it. You still want that? He said, that's just what we want. Okay, fine. Said him a piece. Have a nice day.
Cough, cough. Wood gasifier. Cough, cough.
Yeah.
There it is.
That's the only reason he joined us tonight.
It is. That's why. Yeah, he's out of here now. Yep. All right. Well, let's file this into the file system of another topic, and let's move into the main topic for tonight, shall we? So this evening, we figured we'd go back to ham radio. Weird for this show. I know we've only done a couple of episodes on ham radio, but we figured we'd go back into some very basics, because we've gone into a couple of, diving into the weeds a few times and a little bit more heavy tech side of things on some of the past episodes. So we wanted to get right into describing some of the stuff that's very, very beginner level, because we just realized that we've gone way, way too far into the weeds in some of the episodes. We've got some comments on the fact that, hey, what did you say for that whole hour and a half in that past episode? So we wanted to kind of break down and get some of the basics out there and help anybody that's thinking about getting into the amateur radio world, or is kind of on the fence about writing a test to get your license, or just kind of wondering about some of the things that we've talked about on other episodes. We're going to get into some basics here tonight. We've got Scott, if you want to start us out.
So, forever ago, I bought a used satellite phone, figuring, great, I can have independent comms. But it's dependent on someone else's technology, something I don't have control of. If I want to pay for a subscription, it's ridiculously expensive. So radio is beautiful because it's just point to point. My setup and Eric's setup can talk to each other without sort of equipment in between. So it's just lovely. So I went and I did my ham radio license with a local radio club and met some of the nicest and smartest people around. Like, everyone was just so welcoming and so happy to sit and explain everything. And like, they just genuinely enjoy the hobby and genuinely enjoy introducing other people to the hobby. So if you're in the least bit interested, find a ham radio club or like one of the rack courses online, because these people are wonderful. So what is a radio wave? What is radio? We have to dial it back to what is the electromagnetic spectrum, right? So everything from radio waves through to light, through to X-rays, all of it is part of the radio spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum. So when we're seeing light, that's part of the spectrum. Red light is sort of one frequency, and it goes all the way through the rainbow, to all the way to purple, indigo, ultraviolet, sort of beyond what we can see. So you sort of have to keep that in mind. And the fact that there's only one spectrum is why they have to license it and pay attention, right? So if you are doing something that's going to impede others using radios, that's going to be a problem, right? So within the spectrum, there's sort of little different wedges of frequency that, some are reserved for the military or first responders or broadcast television. So we're talking about the stuff that is sort of little wedges that are reserved for amateur radio, high frequency radio, CB radio, little family like the FRS, GMRS, sort of, these are the ones we're talking about. So it's just sort of a smaller part of the spectrum, right? So what is a radio then, right? We're going to dial it back to the light bulb analogy. Okay? Picture one of the old school incandescent light bulbs. You pump in some energy and the filament starts to send out light, right? That's what a radio is doing. It's just part of the spectrum that our eyeballs can't see. It's something else is able to see it, right? So your radio equipment is pumping energy into the antenna. The antenna is kind of acting like a filament, and that's what's sending out that signal, sort of just bouncing around, right? And depending how we use it, what we're tuned for, what equipment we have, just depends which are the signals we can hear and, sort of hear, see, our equipment can pick up, sniff, whatever you want to talk about it. So when you talk about radio equipment, we talk about a transceiver. That sounds very complicated. What it is a transmitter and a receiver in one box. So for the analogy, let's split it into two. We're going to have a transmitter and we're going to have a receiver. Okay? For your transmitter, picture a guitar, right? You got your strings on your guitar, you pluck one and it's going to vibrate and send waves out on the frequency that string is tuned to. You set up a listening device over here that is only listening for that exact guitar note, right? That exact string being plucked, right? You're ignoring all the other notes. So you pluck the string here, and over there, that receiver is just listening for that, nothing else. So that's kind of the analogy of what your radio system is doing, right? So if I'm trying to talk to Eric or Terry or Jeff, right? If we're tuned, the transmitter and the receiver are tuned to that same frequency, that same guitar note, so to speak, right? That's how, right? I send out a signal, they can hear it, they can send back a signal, and I can hear it, right? The fact that it's a radio wave versus a guitar string, It's the exact same context, right? We're just talking about sort of these waves of different frequencies, right? Different guitar strings are different frequencies. They're reserved for, this one's for the military, this one's for first responders, this one's for amateur radio, this one's for broadcast radio, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about there, right? We've also talked about different strengths, right? We talk about like, what's a 5 watt versus 100 watt?
More power, the better, right? More power, the better.
Always. But the reality is, if so, picture you're standing on a dock at a lake and your friend is on a dock on the far side of the lake, right? It's a nice, dark, not a lot of interference. They can blink one of those little keychain lights where it's just like an LED and a battery and nothing else. And you can see that light blinking, right? That's sort of you're close enough and there's, it's dark enough. There's no interference from other light. You can see that light blinking. They can send a message, right? If there's more light out because there's a full moon, there's a bit of haze, they all of a sudden need one of these massive mag lights that has, the size of a baseball bat full of D-cell batteries to convey that same message, to be able to send that message across. Likewise, if you have receiving equipment that's more sensitive, if you're watching the little tiny keychain light through binoculars, your receiving equipment is more sensitive and it's easier to see that message that they're trying to send, right? So that's a great analogy talking about line of sight. Certain radio frequencies need that line of sight, right? If there's an island between you and the other dock, you can't see the flashlight, right? So then we can change into other frequencies or work with a repeater. So we'll start talking about other frequencies first. So high frequency, for this model, let's talk about a searchlight bouncing off the cloud. You got the bat signal. Where's Bat Brad? We got the bat signal bouncing off a cloud and bouncing down to you. So even though there's an island in between you, it bounces up off there and comes down to you, and you can get that information. The analogy isn't about how bright the spotlight is. It's about something that's kind of tuned to bounce off clouds, right? Likewise, if you're driving and you're coming up to a hill or a curve and you see some headlights shining off the guardrail or shining off the clouds or the trees above the hill, right? You don't see the headlights yet. You don't have line of sight, but that information is coming to you that there's a car coming the opposite direction, right? That's kind of the analogy for HF radio. We can go back to talk about repeaters where you need line of sight. So we'll do a different analogy here where you want to talk to someone way across a crowded room, right? They can't hear you and you can't hear them, but you're standing next to the guy on the stage that has a megaphone. So the guy on the megaphone and the guy on the stage can hear you. So you say something to the megaphone and that megaphone repeats it, hence the name repeater. It's very complicated. And all of a sudden that message is broadcast much stronger, much louder from a higher position to your friend across the room. And all of a sudden you're able to relay a message that you wouldn't be able to relay otherwise, right? That's what a repeater is doing. You put that antenna nice and high up and it just sends messages back and forth exactly what, just repeats what it's told and doesn't change anything, right? But that way you can have that line of sight. So if you at the top of the island have, a big dome mirror on a tower and you can see the flashlight in the mirror, but you can't see it directly, that's kind of how a repeater is working. So then we've also talked about AM versus FM, right? So picture if you're playing a trombone and it's sort of a very good trombone player that's sort of playing, feathering it, and it almost sounds like the musical instrument is speaking. That's kind of what your radio is doing. It's sort of bending the frequency a little bit so that you can sort of extract the sound on the other side, right? AM is amplitude modification, right? It just makes it, goes up and down, versus frequency, FM modification, right? Where it sort of stretches or shrinks the frequency to kind of create the groove on a record. Essentially, you're making a sound, a way for that machine at the other end, the receiver, to interpret what this sound is supposed to be, and play the sound you intend it to play that way. So, I mean, in a very rough analogy, that's what radio is, right? You're just using these photons, these waves in the electromagnetic spectrum, to send information out that's either going line of sight to your whoever you want to hear it. You're just locally, you're talking on little walkie-talkie FRS radios. Perfect. You talk to your buddy at the hunt camp. Excellent. Or you're in town, you bounce it off a repeater and you talk to your friend on the other side of town. Or you're looking to talk, 2 towns over without a repeater. So you bounce high frequency, sort of on a narrow trajectory up. So it bounces down. NVIS, or it's the part of radio that I'm most interested in. Or you set up a high frequency setup like Eric has, and you with 5 watts you can talk to Spain. It's really quite impressive.
What does the NVIS stand for again?
Near vertical impedance skywave.
And so that's just a variation on HF, you said?
Near vertical instance skywave.
Thank you. So yes, and so normally for HF, you want to have your antenna set, way high up. You have a great long wire feed antenna, 100 feet in the air. That's kind of the easiest to get out. But picture that sort of long sloping M where it's sort of bouncing off, and you have a skip zone because it's going up, hitting that stratosphere and coming back down a couple of 1,000 kilometers away. Well, that doesn't do me any good if I want to talk to the town 100 kilometers away, or, for example, my buddy's new cottage. So if you move your antenna down, so it's closer to the ground, it's like 6 to 10 feet. Is that fair, Eric?
You're going to start an argument, Scott.
No, because
however you set it.
It depends.
Yeah. I've had luck with about 6 to 8 feet.
Yeah. So you set it lower to the ground. So instead of kind of going out at more of an angle, it goes more vertical, hits the stratosphere, and that sort of first bounce is coming down closer to you. So that skip zone where the higher antenna bounces off the atmosphere, comes down, and kind of misses a couple of towns before it hits that radio wave hits the ground again. You're kind of making it a higher angle so that it bounces down closer to where you are, which is, like I said, exactly what I'm interested in.
I saw a really good example of this. The Tech Prepper does a really good example of this, where he sits down, he has a garden hose in his hand, and he sprays the garden hose at about a 45-degree angle away from him. The water doesn't hit him, but it goes a good distance away and hits the ground, right? So that's to kind of put to picture what the radio wave looks like on just like a higher up antenna. Then he takes the hose and he just holds it right in front of him and just sprays it straight up. Water falls all around him and on him, right? So at that point now, that's the radio wave going up, bouncing off the ionosphere close by and coming right back down really close to you. So NVIS is the same idea, shooting the signal right up and having it come right back down instead of it going off on a big angle and then bouncing about 1,000 or so kilometers away, coming back down. So people close by can hear you instead of people further away. That was a really good way of kind of picturing it.
And it's really
really good. Quick question for you.
It's huge.
So
sorry, I'm just going to talk about NVS for a second, Brad.
Go ahead.
It's really interesting how, depending how you have it set up, if I'm talking to Eric on an NVIS setup where it's bound, it's that garden hose going straight up and coming down, within a couple of 100 kilometers, he can hear me, but he can broadcast from his higher antenna, and I won't be able to hear him because it's skipping right over me.
Right over top.
Quick question from the listeners there too. So Phil says, if you wanted to switch between VHF and HF, would you need 2 separate radios, or would you just need to change the antenna connection?
Depends on the radio. Sorry, a lot of tech answers are going to be depends.
There are radios that do both. Yeah. You end up paying a premium for that, whether it's worth just starting with like a VHF, UHF radio, talking to a repeater in town. You probably get away a lot cheaper getting into the hobby. HF radios do tend to be a little bit more expensive, and radios that sort of do all 3 bands tend to be even more expensive. You're paying for the privilege of convenience.
So, like for example, like the UV5R does VHF UHF for like $40, but if you do like the ICOM 7100, 7300, you can get all 3 VHF, UHF, and HF, but it's going to be $1,000 plus. Like
easy.
Yeah, $1,500. Yeah. So you're paying for the privilege of like a shack in one radio, right? So
and to further on Phil's question, you'll typically have different antennas. So
that too, yeah.
Some radios will have 2 antenna outputs, one for the HF side, one for the VHF UHF side, just because they know they're going to separate antennas. So whether you have a change setup or just have totally separate antennas, you have to keep that in mind. One of the things that we haven't talked about is different antennas, right? So different antennas will be tuned to different wavelengths, right? When you're talking about high frequency on very long wavelengths, one of your ideal antennas is just a very long wire that is, an appropriate fraction or an entire wavelength. So if you're talking about a 40 meter long wavelength and you want to have a 40 meter long antenna wire, that's a whole lot different from the 6-inch stubby that does your GMRS radio and is sort of well tuned to those frequencies.
Yeah.
So, quick question for you. You were talking, Scott, if I had a very tall antenna that I would hit that skip zone and skip it 500-600 kilometers away from me. Is that at the top of that tower? Is that a vertical antenna or a horizontal antenna?
Yes.
I'm going to have to say it depends.
It could be either.
Yeah, you can set up antennas all different ways. There's, you look on like the Radio World Canada website, and they've got 50 different antennas that go in all different directions.
Okay, so part 2 of my question.
Yep.
You were saying if I brought my antenna closer to the ground, I wouldn't skip as far away. Again, it depends on the antenna, if it's vertical or horizontal.
Correct.
Yeah. So
it takes a lot of playing around too.
Yeah, like the higher antenna versus lower antenna is that garden hose example that Eric alluded to from the Tech Prepper, where the angle the water is shooting out away from him is kind of the equivalent of the angle your radio waves are shooting out. So if you're set close to the ground, they kind of have to go more straight up. If you're set higher in the air, they can go out on more of that angle and sort of spread out around the world.
It's almost like if you have to like coordinate between the bug out location and your house, you probably want to set that antenna ahead of time and test it.
That is
weird.
Weird. You almost want to see what works while you have a cell phone to back up, so you can actually talk back and forth.
Chuck,
like, can you hear me now?
Chalk one up for the intern.
And stay tuned for upcoming events for a way that you can actually test this.
Look at that.
To your point, Ian, that's exactly what Eric and I were doing. Sort of playing around with with these setups where, we have reliable, easy cell phone communication so that we can figure out some of this stuff and sort of help dial it in to figure out what's working, what's not. Because it is both an art and a science.
100%.
Well, and it depends on your use case too, right? Some people like myself don't really like people, so I don't want to talk to some guy in France. But I would like to talk to my guy that's just out of VHF range that is like very near, but still HF is the best way to go because he's got 3 mountains between me and him or something. I'd rather have something that can work shorter distances. And so yeah, like I mean, I don't, different I guess goal for my HF setup than the average guy, right? Who wants to make contacts in like Easter Island. I don't. But
well, and I exactly agree with you. I mean, I think it's fascinating being able to, to talk to Europe. And if there's some, huge catastrophe and being able to get news from outside, sort of looking back in, yeah, that's a valuable resource. But the reality is, if I'm trying to talk to someone in my mag or sort of an local thing within a reasonable distance, I have this to trade. I'm looking for this. Who's got? Oh, you got it. Great. Right.
Yeah.
So someone on this podcast once, started talking about bartering being a super useful option. Right. So
on this podcast,
yeah,
believe it or not, I think we fired the guy for some reason. But anyway, I totally agree with you, Ian. Being able to talk locally is like, that's my interest. That's exactly what I'm interested in.
And local can be a relative term, right? It might be like 2 towns over, but outside of VHF range nonetheless, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
so, that bug out location that's 100 kilometers away that, you're at your cottage and your spouse is working back, in your city house or something like that. Is that a communication setup that you want to have independent of other technology? I can plug this radio into a battery here onto this antenna and, talk to the significant other at the cottage. That
or even into solar.
Well,
yeah. Well, exactly.
So actually, there's a related question here from Shelter, Fire, Water, First Aid, and Rescue. That's a big name for a channel. But don't know if you touched on this. How do you feel about CBs as well as communication, as well as for communication device and emergency or traffic jams? Actually, I got a good answer for that if I can step in as the intern here. So, because honestly, all it takes is you buy it the cheapest CB radio you can, turn it on, and listen for about 5 minutes, and you'll turn it off and never turn it on again because it's the Wild West on CBs, and generally there's a bunch of guys yeehawing and screaming and reeing on there, and you'll find that ham radio frequencies are not only less busy, they're a little more organized, a little more polite, and so if the CB radio is already on fire right now and kind of out of hand, imagine trying to get an emergency message through on that versus an HF where you might actually be the only guy on the frequency, it's worlds different. So as far as using a CB, it's probably easier set up and no license required and all that stuff, but you will never ever get a coherent, clear, consistent message out of there because it's just overloaded all the time.
There are certain areas on certain bands where there's similar on HF, but surprisingly they stay put the one frequency for the most part, and they don't spread elsewhere. So if you are a ham nerd and you're over at 7.200, that's always fun. But beyond that,
but there's certain times where they'll have a DAT and they'll be super busy on the HF. But that's temporary in nature too. It's not like you're listening to Trucker Jimmy down in South Carolina, going off about something and he's skip zoning you into your place in North Bay, and you don't really care about his beer run with this, the bandit, and it's just not interesting at all. I had a CB radio actually hooked up to my vehicle there back in high school, and it was annoying back then. So I can only imagine it's even worse now. It's anyway.
And it's interesting looking at FRS and GMRS. They're in Canada, free public use, no license, but they're very limited in what they can do. It's just a little handheld with a fixed antenna. They max out at 2 watts. Some frequencies it's half a watt, so that the idea is you got a whole bunch of people using FRS radios crowding a ski hill or something like that, trying to organize when you're going in for cocoa. By being lower power, it's trying to keep it contained so that one town over at the other ski hill, those people can use the same frequencies and they're not going to hear it. Because, you run into exactly that where it sort of gets so overcrowded and so drowned out that it makes it hard to use. So FRS and CB, because they're unlicensed public use, less organized and less polite, not that people are trying to be rude, but it just happens.
Well, and actually, real world example with the FRS radios. I mean, maybe about 500 feet between the pump house and my actual house, and we were having trouble just because there's a few trees in the way with the low power setting the way it was, just even communicating back and forth using those two radios during a power outage. So it was like, the really limited usage, right? So like, more like kids walkie talkies with a fancy covering is all they are. So, but anyway.
But I will say any form of communication is better than no form of communication. So if all you can get is a CB radio, use it. Right?
Yeah.
It may be your mileage may vary depending on your location.
Well, especially if you get a set for free, like if you get a couple of CB radios and somebody hands them to you for free, okay, go for it. Like, obviously I'm not going to poo-poo free stuff. I mean, but
Well, and again, depending on your use scenario. So my buddy's cottage actually came with an old CB radio base station that I presume they use to call people in when it's dinner time. They had a little handheld out in the boat and, a CB base station there so that if someone's out fishing, they can talk back and forth. They're a little removed from a lot of population, so you're not hitting all of the CB radio traffic, hopefully. So again, what is your use for radio? What are your goals? And if CB is appropriate for that, because it saves you the trouble of getting licensed. And let's face it, CB equipment you can get super cheap compared to like HF stuff. If it meets your needs, why not?
Well, two things on that. One, any megaphone, your analogy, Scott, is still a megaphone. No matter who's listening, it's still somehow to get some signal out to maybe get you some help. And two, you would be very surprised at how expensive some of those CB radios are. You go into some truck stops and they're $400 or $500 for a simple one.
Well, that's because those guys too, they live on that thing, right? And they're
absolutely.
It's a side hobby they can do while they're driving, right? So
yes, but it's still like they're getting up there in their complexities nowadays. I got a couple of buddies of mine who pull gears, and they can go a lot further today than they can 10 years ago.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'm not slagging on CB radio.
Neither am I. I'm just saying you'd be surprised at how much they do cost nowadays. And like I said, megaphone's still a megaphone, no matter who's listening.
Yeah, very true.
Cool.
To that point, Brad, anytime you're broadcasting, you are broadcasting on open air, unencrypted. Anyone listening can hear what you're saying. I mean, that's, again, because there is only one spectrum.
Yes.
We're all sharing the exact same radio waves.
You are absolutely right.
But it's just another thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, but it's also simpler too. Like CB has only got 40 channels, so you can just say channel 40 versus a frequency number and everything else. So, so there is that aspect of it. I mean, like I'd like to slag on it a bit, but I mean, it's much simpler setup. So,
and just when you describe a channel, whether it's on FRS or CB, it is, everyone agrees that this exact frequency, we're going to label channel number 3, and any radio you have, it's pre-programmed that exact frequency, that exact tiny bit of the electromagnetic spectrum, when you turn your radio to channel 3, that's the one it's talking on.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what a channel is. It's just a preset memory for an exact frequency.
It's a human label.
Yeah,
exactly.
So it's got, or is that?
I don't know. I probably just talk long-winded all night.
No, I was gonna say I can talk about my stuff there if you want.
Yeah, no, let's jump in.
Yeah, well, because like, okay, so even your stuff was like even like beyond the basics too. So like we've actually kind of skipped over a bunch of the other stuff too. So, one of the complaints I've had from people on other podcasts that happen on Monday nights is that like actually getting qualified is a bit of more of a barrier than other people would see it as, right? Like not everybody's like, oh yeah, I'll just do that exam and call it a day. Like other people are just like, it's just not worth my time, it's not worth the effort, whatever, and just to get licensed for something I'll never use, all that stuff. So we actually haven't really harped too much on how there is some, I guess, assistance available to get qualified. So I'm also guilty of this too. I think Eric is as well. Is that we keep calling it Industry Canada, right? And take a typical government form. Why use one word when 4 words will do? So they changed it from Industry Canada to the actual name is Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada. Sorry, that's 5 words. Sorry.
Say that 10 times fast.
Yeah, I mean we shouldn't call it Industry Canada because now you can't even Google it, right? So I mean, we should actually use the actual name of it. And so yeah, I put a link in the show notes here that Eric, I'm sure, will throw on the chat there. But basically, there's one home page that will take you to the place where you can find practice exams. All the questions they will ask you on the exam with the answers. And you can actually, like, without having a ham radio license, you can start opening an account up and everything else before you get your call sign and all that stuff. Yep. Simply for the fact that trying to break down that barrier of getting that initial qualification going, it's actually not as bad as you would think. So on that note too, there's also some free software available online for people to get qualified. One is called Examiner. Pun intended. Yes, and it's basically you can download all the basic questions into it. It'll run a bunch of practice exams for you, and you can either choose it to show you the answer, or you can actually try and run it as a practice exam yourself. So you can basically brute force all the questions eventually if you keep taking practice exams over and over again, like some people did. And
no shame.
No shame here at all. Like, I'm fully good.
Like, honestly, if we can touch on that for a second, all the learning happens when you actually start to get the radios in your hand and you start to connect things together and you start to experiment and play around with it. The exam is a barrier for a lot of people to get by, and I think it's because you're trying to learn everything by the textbook, and it freaks a lot of people out, right?
And a typical government format, right? Like the exam has little to nothing to do with reality of actually working a ham radio. So, like myself, like I'm learning every time we talk about something, just like I asked Scott 10 minutes ago what something meant. I don't know, like frick, I mean, I fully admit it. But I mean, just get the exam done. Just memorize the questions as required or whatever, and just get through the exam. Then the real learning starts. It's almost like a license to learn, like you said, right?
Yep. That link that Ian was talking about is literally the actual questions you will get on the exam.
Yeah,
just to be clear on that.
Yeah, so there's no secret. No secret as to what's coming on the exam. Like, I mean, you'll see some familiar questions, and you'll be like, "I know it's answer C" without even looking. But anyways, like, and there's also another piece of software out there called Ham Puzzle, and a Ham Puzzle represents about 10% of the exam, and basically it's like radio assembly. Now, you and I, well, maybe not Eric, but most people will just buy a prepackaged radio. They won't build their own, right? Whereas probably about 10% of your mark is put towards what components go in what order when you're building a radio. Well, it's something you're never going to use, but why not get that extra mark on your exam? And so this Ham Puzzle shows you how to put the components together in proper order so that you'll get an extra 10% of the exam, which hopefully gets you to the 80% mark so you can get your HF frequency access. So use the free software.
Cool.
If you can't find it, we'll send it to you. So just drop us an email, and we will make sure that you have access to all the free software. I actually went as far as I downloaded the questions, highlighted the correct answer, so you can actually just print them off. And if you're sitting there on a lunch break, you can just read through them without a computer. There's tons of ways to do it, of course, right?
Yep.
And I guess we haven't really touched on. I guess we've kind of danced around the issue a few times, but the actual reason from a preparedness standpoint as to why we're always pushing ham radio, I don't think that in case of the zombie apocalypse, people are going to sit behind a ham shack for days upon days upon days just so they can chat with some guy in France and ask him how the weather is. I mean,
wait a minute, what?
Yeah. It's true.
That's why I was doing this.
You may not. I mean, well, you might, but anyways, yeah. So no, honestly, it could be something as simple as like Scott for his bug out location idea. It might just be like, hey, Scott will send a message to his buddy up in his bug out location. I'm executing plan number 1. Doesn't have to be an encrypted code. Just say, listen, I'm plan number 1. I'll be on my way. And then the guy can look up plan number 1 in his binder and see what you're doing. And even if it's 5 minutes worth of radio, it might be worth your time just to have that ability to do so. It doesn't take a whole lot. It doesn't take a massive battery bank backup system or anything else. It might just be a handheld VHF thing just to talk to somebody across town. Even like it's basically a kind of a last chance to send a tight message to somebody that knows what you want to do, and so you can coordinate yourselves. Like, I'm going home. I'm not going to come to work and try and find you. And good, we'll both go home then. It might be just something as simple as that. So from a preparedness standpoint, it might not be a long-term thing for you. It might be. I don't know. I'm sure Gunny can relate to the fact that radios can be a force multiplier.
Very much so.
Yeah. So in case you have zombies coming in from the back and zombies coming in from the front, or just all from one direction, you can maybe focus your energy towards that direction for reasons. And if the other guys don't have that radio, then all of a sudden you have an advantage. And it might just be in that kind of a use case. But the last one, I think we did touch on it 10 minutes ago, but the barter item idea. You might be Eric in the zombie apocalypse and have a battery bank and have the HF to talk to buddy in France about the weather and stuff. But hey, all of a sudden now you can pass a message and say, hey, for a dozen eggs, I'll pass the message to your mother-in-law in Florida that you're okay and you're going to be at the lake house for the next 6 months. That might be a useful skill.
Yep.
And if that's your plan, I mean, that's a community. Nobody in the community is going to poo-poo you having that ability to do so, right? So, right. Whatever your long-term goals are, or maybe what your, I don't know, I guess, what do you call it? I guess equipment requirements are, like that could be an item. Just as a side note, I mean, everybody uses VHF and UHF at work, like whether it be first responders or whether it be just like loggers or truckers or whatever. Lots of people are using all that stuff, but HF is still in use. A lot of people think of it's kind of like an outdated kind of means of communication, but I mean, honestly, general maritime, like every ship on the ocean right now still has an HF rig on board, and whether it be just as a backup thing for when the satellite goes down, or just as a means of emergency communication or whatever. Airplanes use them daily. Just shocking how many vehicles and stuff still have an HF on board, and it's still a necessary piece of equipment.
Yep. Yeah, there's on 14.300, there's the maritime net that happens all the time, and it's just an emergency style net in case there's something going on and they can't get their regular way of communication out there. So you'll hear that all the time on the 20 meter band. But yeah, it's very much so still something that is utilized, like Ian was saying, and we harp on getting your license and practicing now, because that's just something that we casually mention every once in a while. Get some equipment, learn how to use it before the zombies are knocking at your door.
Well,
I know a lot of people harp on us for, I don't want to get a license, I'll be on a list. Well, listen to this podcast. You're already on a list.
We're all on a list.
We're all on lists.
Yeah.
That's right.
But I mean, like Josh from Ham Radio Crash Course, right? He said it best. He says, I can teach a guy to use an AR-15 in 15 minutes. I can't teach somebody to use an HF rig in 15 minutes. And so, yeah, maybe
Good point.
Yeah, time might be better spent learning how to work those dials like a pro versus be a total operator right off the bat. So, just saying.
That's true.
And one's less likely to be banned than the other. I'm not saying which is which, but
never say never.
For now, yeah. And that leads me to what we will talk about in the podcast challenge as well, as far as banning goes.
We got another question in the live chat here, just asking if you need a different license to build an antenna. You do not. Just your basic license in Canada. You get into having to build like actual radio type systems. If you want to build something that's not a kit and design your own radio, then you need an advanced license. But just for building your own antennas, I don't even think you need a license.
No,
I don't even think you need a license period to build an antenna. It's just a transmit on it.
Yeah, you can build whatever you want.
Yeah.
And on that note, actually, if you do start studying the advanced course, they tend to spurg out like to the max on antennas. Like a good chunk of the exam is antenna
Sure is.
stuff. So
Yep.
I was shocked when I saw how much of it is about antennas. So I was like, okay, well,
Yep.
that's going to answer a lot of questions. But
Antennas and safety, electrical safety, tons of that.
safety schmafety.
I was going to ask what's covered specifically in the advanced that would make us want to go that route. So that's useful to know.
The one qualification the advanced gets you that the basic with honors doesn't get you. Like basic with honors gets you access to everything, right? If you get 80% on the exam, you get VHF, UHF, and HF. If you get less than 80%, you just get the VHF, UHF, right? And so that's the problem. So that's why you want to brute force that exam and get as high a mark as you can. But the advanced gives you the ability, and yes, there's exceptions, Eric, I know, but the advanced gets you the ability to build or like run a repeater.
That's it. Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
so you can maintain a repeater system, and you get a little bit more power, if I remember correctly, too.
Yeah. So I mean, if you want to put that megaphone on top of a tree in your back 40 or whatever, and have like the Scott repeater that reaches the lake house or something, you can do that with the advanced, and nobody can stop you. I mean, you still have to go through the motions, paperwork, getting a frequency assigned, and a bunch of other stuff, but it's possible. Yeah, and there are ways around that without the advanced, but we won't talk about that right now because that's other stuff.
It's called pirate radio.
Well, no, but you can also do crossbands. Like, I don't want to talk about crossband repeaters.
True. Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, no, I mean, seriously, like the advanced thing has that one benefit, is that the fact that if you want to run your own like backdoor repeater that's specific, that is for your homies, that's a good way to do it.
Or if you want to help out your local ham club that you're going to go talk to after listening to this episode, you can help maintain their current repeater systems and learn about repeater systems and how they're deployed and how they're set up, and then go do your own.
That would require me to people outside the house, though. And I don't know if I want to do that.
Yeah, but a lot of people, that brings me to another point, is a lot of ham radio operators are also preppers.
Well, yes, a lot, but not all. Yeah.
Yep. But you'll run into a lot of similar-minded folks, that's for sure.
What I like about this approach is, for a fellow like me who's very hands-on, it would give one the opportunity to get hands-on to the gear and to the repeaters and the experience of it before you commit to an advanced exam. And I think that's what I would love, because I'm a hands-on sort of fella. I tend to have a lot of hands-on people who gravitate to my content because it's really about, hey, let's do it. And that's what I like about it. And I'm pretty sure I'll find a whole bunch of those around here. So I love that strategy. Reach out to the local ham clubs.
Also, when you wore green, wasn't the kind of the motto like, explain, demonstrate, repeat 3 times or something like that? Isn't that how they kind of...
Oh, yes. It's wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. And they hammer it into you while you're doing it too. So...
Yeah, same idea at my work too. It's like they explain it once, they demonstrate it once, and they expect you to do it under supervision like a few times at least, and then they check the box and say, yeah, good to go.
That's right. And in our case, sometimes they like to have you do it under stress.
Well,
it really, really takes hold,
That's the best way to do it, right?
100%.
Phil's got an awesome question in the live chat. It says, can ham radios be tracked if you're not transmitting but are connected to a repeater?
Well, I can answer that.
Great question.
Yeah, so, okay. Technically, you're never really connected to a repeater per se. There's no actual physical or electrical link. It's basically just the only time that the repeater actually gets activated is when you transmit with a certain code. It doesn't matter really right now. But until you start transmitting, that repeater's not even activated per se and not rebroadcasting your signal. So you won't be tracked. You're not connected to it. And if you're not transmitting, nobody can track you anytime, anywhere. Now, if you are transmitting on certain frequency bands, yes, there is something called a DF steer, or there's other ways to call it. But anyways, like there's triangulation involved. There's a great movie about that, about World War II. There's a new radio movie about that. I'll put the link in the show notes here, where they actually have a true story about a lady that was doing pirate radio and captured in occupied Europe, and she kept on having to move her station around because they kept on trying to triangulate her. And yeah, it's a thing. Only when you're transmitting, though.
Yep. Your local ham club will most likely participate in what they call fox hunts, where they will set up a radio to just randomly transmit at intervals, maybe every 5 minutes or so, and then they'll try to actually find that radio that's transmitting. Wow. But as far as, like Ian said, If you've got a radio tuned to a repeater and you are not transmitting, that repeater and everybody else that's transmitting on it has absolutely no idea that you are listening, and there's no way to track you.
Cool stuff.
Right. Yeah, it's fun stuff. Just seeing Dave's question here. Throw that up in the live chat here. It says, trying to get my brother in Delaware interested in an alternative way to contact my East Coast family from Kentucky in emergency situations. Otherwise, CB would meet my needs locally. Yeah, probably HF is your thing, Dave, for that one.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love HF.
Yep. It's a lot of fun. In a nerd kind of way, of course.
So the movie is called All the Light We Cannot See. Basically, it's a Netflix movie that's out right now.
Cool. Good to know.
Yeah. Anyway, other than that, I think that's all I had.
Yeah, I was going to say anything from the other panelists, and I'm mindful that we're at an hour 20 here, but
I just wanted to quickly
go for it.
Just kind of say, do your research a little bit. Don't just go out and buy a radio that you think looks good or whatever. Do your research, talk to others, see what system would probably best suit your situation. So, is your situation, you want to talk to France, you're going to be on 3, 4, 5 times a week, or is it more going to be just a backup emergency type situation? Obviously, depending on what you want to get into, it can get very expensive very quickly. So have a plan, have a budget, start small and build your way up from there. I'm not saying don't jump in with both feet and get something good if you have the resources and you're pretty sure that's what you want to do. But I know for me, I've started small. I'm still small, and I'll be continuing to build my stuff up as I need to, as the needs and the funds and everything else happen.
That's a good point from Jeff. Is you can jump into this this radio thing and spend a ton of money real quick. When a simple like $40 Baofeng radio will do you just fine. So kind of map it out and work within your means. Don't go spending thousands of dollars on something that you may or may not use, and reach out to the local ham clubs and talk to the folks there, because a lot of them will actually very happily say, well, come on over and see my setup and check it out and use it. And that costs you maybe a coffee, right? So there's nothing wrong with that, to get your hands on some good equipment and figure out if it's even for you, and then go from there. But just a cheapy little handheld radio is all you really need to get started. And after you play around with that for a bit, you'll expand.
My summary of all of this is, don't be intimidated. There are people that will happily explain all of this stuff to you. The ham radio community genuinely enjoys getting more hams involved, getting people educated on this stuff, showing off their ham shack, showing off their equipment. They take such pride in it. So don't be intimidated. Reach out to, one of the local clubs, people online. Everyone sort of enjoys this hobby. So you don't have to jump in with 2 feet. Just put a toe in the water and see what happens. And
ignore the occasional chirp about Chinese radios. Because you're going to hear those.
It's true. Yep.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. It's okay.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that, shall we move into the podcast challenge?
Yeah, sounds good. So my podcast challenge today was the one thing I learned by talking to local ham guys, is the fact that the government is always trying to steal away frequency bands, right? We could really use that one for research, or we could really use that one for medical use or whatever. And so the problem is that their main concern seems to be the lack of new hams coming into the scene, right? And I think the best thing we can do right now, if you want to preserve this, is go out and get licensed, because the more ham radio operators they have on file, the less likely they are to come and steal away certain bands, right? Because I think the bands were given back to us in the 30s and stuff, and I think they keep on trying to encroach into that. So I guess the actual challenge would be to reach out to a panelist and start studying for your ham license, and the more hams, the less likely the man will be to try and take the frequency bands from us.
That's a good thing to point out as well. Once you get your license, it's yours for life. So just keep that in mind. There's no renewal. You don't have to keep up with it. So once you've got it, if you don't ever use it again, it's still assigned to you.
And shockingly, no fee for it yet.
No, not yet. So get in now.
You've got me in the frugal space right there.
Yeah. Yeah. They haven't taxed it yet, so just give it time.
Gunny's going to write his exam tomorrow now.
Yep. I'm going to start cramming now. I know how these people work.
That's lost revenue as far as they're concerned, right?
Yeah.
We've given away the secret now.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
All right. We'll move into upcoming events. So tomorrow, the local preparedness group here, we're starting to get into a more standardized NVIS type of net setup. So we're going to try and do it a couple times a month and just hop on a frequency. We're going to do on 40 meters at 8:30. We'll do the NVIS test. We'll do that for about half an hour, and then we're going to switch over into VAR AC, which is the digital mode, which is beyond kind of the scope of this episode. But if you want to hop over to the Discord, I'm going to be lining everything up in there so everybody knows what the frequencies are and what time we're doing things. I'm going to do net control tomorrow night for it, but we'll have different net controllers throughout the tests. But we're going to try and do the NVIS thing and see who within the province we can contact and who outside of the province as well. But get kind of an idea of where our antennas can reach, how far they can reach, what kind of signal we can get out, and what we can receive. So if anybody is interested, licensed or not, if you're licensed, you can actually participate and communicate with us or try to. If you're not, if you hop in the Discord as well, we can explain ways that you can use your computer to just listen in and hear what it sounds like and get an idea of what the transmissions are like, at least for the single sideband side of things where we're just doing voice communications. You won't be able to listen to the digital side. Well, you can, but it'll sound like a bunch of screeching and weird computer noises. So there's no point in listening to it. But if you want to listen to the audio side of it, I can explain to you in the Discord as well how to listen into that. So it's tomorrow night. That's November the 6th, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be doing a NVIS test, and everybody's welcome.
They're absolutely fascinating to listen to because people report in their call sign, other information, but they'll say where they're sending from. So you're like, oh, wait a minute. That person's in such and such a town. Great. That's where my folks live. You know, it's just neat to know that you can talk to wherever they're broadcasting from.
All right, Jeff, you've got a weather blurb.
I do. So Ian mentioned it probably an hour or more ago about the wet conditions out west. So there's presently an atmospheric river affecting the Pacific Northwest. There's been flooding reported in Seattle and Portland and other areas. This is kind of similar to what happened last winter down in California, where they got all that snow and rain. They got atmospheric river, just one on top of the other. I don't think it's going to be that bad here, but it will linger for several more days. So more flooding can be expected. I mean, obviously with that, the good part about it, I guess, if you want to talk about that, is that parts of the Northwest have been dealing with drought conditions for months now. So this is going to go a long way to alleviate their drought conditions. It's probably too little too late for crops and stuff like that, but at least it might give them a good head start in the spring. And I'm also looking at and keeping an eye on a low pressure system that's expected to make its way into the Great Lakes in the midweek, bringing a blend of snow, freezing rain, and ice pellets to the north, and heavy rain expected to the south. So, Terry, you may get to test your GenderLink sooner than later. The exact position of the mixing line hinges with the temperature and the system path, and it still remains a bit uncertain. Current models suggest it will pass over the Lake Huron and Georgian Bay area, likely bringing heavy snow to northeastern Ontario and freezing rain, a threat to central and eastern Ontario. Northern areas like Timmins, Kapuskasing, that could maybe see anywhere from 20 to 30 centimeters of snow. And areas in central Ontario, North Bay, the Muskokas, Algonquin Park, heading out east, Bancroft, even out to the Ottawa Valley. There is the potential for several hours of freezing rain. The most severe conditions are probably going to happen overnight Wednesday. So they may potentially disrupt your Thursday morning commute or other things. And if you've got kids, you may be having some bus cancellations. So just keep an eye on your local weather, and I'll keep popping stuff up on the Discord. Can
you just cancel that weather, Jeff? I'm on vacation this week.
No, that's specifically why I did it. That's specifically why I planned it.
Can confirm it's doggy out here for sure.
All right, we got deal of the week.
Yeah, so 120 millimeter ammo boxes, which are, if you can imagine, the 50 cal size, but like 30 inches high. So they are absolutely massive ammo boxes. Are on clear out at Princess Auto right now, $18, which they're waterproof. They can hold, well, various things that like are fairly long in length and fairly narrow, if you can imagine. And yeah, waterproof, variable, paintable. They can turn them into giant Faraday cages. You can do whatever you want with them. They are pretty handy, and it's like massive multi-use dude Tupperware. So yeah, they're on clear out for the next little while. It seems to be at least till the end of the month anyway. So yeah, $18 for yours. Yeah,
very nice. Hey, anybody have any shout outs? Negative. All right, and the email inbox was dry, so no email to talk about this episode. So with that, I'll bring episode number 221 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast to an end. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or of course your favorite podcast app. Please submit a review wherever you listen. It does help other people find us.
And we do record these shows live on YouTube and the Book of Faces. If you want an early peek at the shows, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Canadian Prepper Podcast, and click the notifications tab. That will give you an alert when we are going live. Anybody has any questions or wants to reach out to me, you can get me at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca, or I frequently monitor the Discord.
Likewise, I'm not responsible enough to have my own email address. Feedback@prepperpodcast.ca is great to get to Scott.
Anybody wants to reach out, it's batbradcpp@gmail.com, and I'm also on the Discord.
And for me, it's just my name, Terry L. Blackmore at hotmail.com, or I do hang out at the annual Preppers Meet Facebook page once in a while and post some horrible content to get people riled up.
And you can find me, the Frugal Gunny, on my YouTube channel, on Rumble, on Facebook, Instagram, and even on the CBP Discord.
Man, you guys are like social media awesome. Like, I mean, I can't even imagine what it'd be like to be on Facebook and Discord. That's just
because
so
we follow the rules, Ian.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah, that's so weird. Yeah.
Do we now?
Every time I have to mention that at work, it's like, hey, there's a WhatsApp group, that you can get on. I was like, can't go on WhatsApp. Why not? I'm like, it's awkward
because it spies on you.
Yeah. So yeah, it's actually kind of funny. So yeah, well, you can reach Ian directly by emailing me at theislandretreat@gmail.com. You can also find me occasionally on Canadian Patriot Podcast, which is on iTunes and YouTube. We record Monday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. I'm also on the Gilded app, but that's the only place I'm allowed, pretty much. For Patriot Podcast, email us if you want to invite. Still, yeah, for now. There you can find us discussing why government waste in society has me wishing for a larger ash cloud.
All right, you can check out Rapid Survival at rapidsurvival.com and get me there on the live chat. You can also email me at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. So thanks for joining us, and until next time, be prepared, stay safe,
and keep learning.